everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot of volleyball to discuss. At Texas A&M, they did that. They reversed swept Louisville and outlasted Nebraska at the Bobbin 5. Yes, down went number one as the Aggies advanced to their first ever Final Four. It wasn't just them. They also will be joined by Pitt, who took down the likes of Minnesota and Purdue, and Kentucky ended the Cinderella run of Cal Poly, and they also took down Creighton, both in sweep. Also, Wisconsin, shocking the world, taking down Stanford and Texas. They're back in the Final Four. Also, in NCAA men's volleyball news, we had the MTSF Men's Volleyball Media Day, the first ever MTSF Men's Volleyball Media Day. How'd that turn out, and what were some special announcements? And just a little bit more on the NCAA men's volleyball side as well. So hand me volleyball. That's next. Drama, so get some volleyball action here on Set Point. It's Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday wherever you're listening from. Either way, you've made your way in episode 329 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without iSports Radio providing the platform to go live on YouTube, Twitch, and on X. Please do follow iSports Radio on several different social media platforms such as X, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Also, make sure to subscribe to iSports Radio on YouTube as well. And Instagram, like I mentioned, is back up and running. We're trying to reach 500 subscribers, and with your help, we could definitely make it happen. And with your help, it is definitely going to be possible. So thank you to everyone for all of your support these last 11 years and for making iSports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. And for the last 11 years, iSports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, pretty much what I did today, and dedicating themselves to all major sports around the country. Thank you to everyone, like I said, for all of your support and for making iSports Radio what it is. We couldn't do it without you. A huge shout out to our two sponsors, Planet Jerky, Premium Biscuit Beef Jerky, and Vital Apparel. So without any further delay, let's get on into what our sponsors are all about. I will see you on the other side. If I can find the little thing. There we go.
Hi, eSports Radio fans. This show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clinking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go. For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the IE Sports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
That's right, everybody. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows and also definitely check out our sponsors. We appreciate them for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. And the way you can follow Setpoint on social media is on X and TikTok at set_point.ie. You can also follow me personally on X as well at Teran Rodriguez 1. You could also follow Setpoint on Instagram as well at set_point.iesr. That's where I'm kind of posting most of my content. And I promise you all, I promise you, chat, I will be posting on TikTok again. I've been posting my recaps of the NCAA tournament on the IE Sports Radio TikTok, but that'll be changing in the near future. But anyway, that is pretty much how you can follow Setpoint on social media. Be on the lookout for some of my new posts from the MPSF Men's Volleyball Media Day, but that a little bit later. But let's get on into the volleyball action. So let us go on to the NCAA Women's Volleyball. We are down to just 4 teams. As my boy Marcus Los Great pops in the chat room, he says, salute to you too, Marcus. Unfortunately, USC is not in the women's volleyball. Oh my God. Marcus says, Teran has grown out the Bob Ross fro. Yes, I'm growing out the Bob Ross afro. And he says he loves it. Well, now that kind of makes my decision of cutting it a little bit of either cutting it or letting it grow out a little bit more simpler. So for you, Marcus, I shall keep it until further notice. But anyway, other than my fro that Marcus pointed out, let's talk some NCAA women's volleyball. We're now in the Sweet 16, which is pretty cool if you ask me. So I got a chance to watch all these Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matches. So without any further delay, let's go into the first Sweet 16 match. It was Creighton versus Arizona State. I was under the impression Creighton had another Elite 8 run under their belt or coming. I had a strange feeling that Arizona State was just not going to be able to keep up with Creighton. And Creighton eventually did it. They hit 370, and they wound up taking down Arizona State in 4 at Kentucky, University of Kentucky. Ava Martin was just her Ava Martin self. She had 23 kills, and Kiara Reinhart added 15 kills, and Jaya Johnson added 12 kills. And Creighton hit 370, which was absolutely incredible. And they had 8 service aces. Now, the Creighton I saw all the way back when USC beat them was not the Creighton that played today. That Creighton was like early season Creighton that was still trying to figure things out. But this Creighton really proved themselves. I was generally impressed by the Jays on how they were able to take down a good quality opponent in Arizona State. Everyone seems to forget that Arizona State won the Big 12 conference, which I think was a big accomplishment considering ASU wasn't even selected. I don't think they were even selected to win the Big 12. I think that was BYU or Kansas. But regardless, the Sun Devils, look, they had a great season. Noemi Glover led the way with 17 kills. They're going to lose quite a bit to graduation, but Glover returns, and Ella Lamagora also will return as well. I'm kind of familiar with her because I covered her back when she was at Long Beach State. So Creighton advanced to the Elite Eight, which I thought was a pretty big deal if you ask me, because that's a mid-major we're talking about. Even though the Big East, I think, is kind of the Power 5 of the Power 4 conferences, I just think Creighton, it's only a matter of time before Creighton does eventually get moved to like the Big 10 or something, heaven forbid. And the next matchup in the Kentucky regional semifinal was Kentucky versus Cal Poly. Cal Poly was the Cinderella of this whole tournament, having knocked off BYU and USC. Obviously, I got to witness that in person, but they had the tall task of attempting to take down a Kentucky team that was red hot, and Kentucky just basically blew the doors off them. And I mean, in the first 2 sets, Cal Poly did everything it possibly could to hang with Kentucky. There was even a point where Cal Poly was only down 2 in set 1, down 19-17, but then Kentucky they didn't relinquish the lead. And then same can be said for set 2. Cal Poly was tied 12-12 in set 2, and then Kentucky pretty much just pulled away from there. And then set 3 was a complete wash with Kentucky winning at 25-7. Holding a team to 7 points, no matter who that team is pretty darn impressive. So for the Wildcats, they were led by Lizzie Carr, who had 11 kills. Kentucky did what Cal Poly pretty much did to majority of their opponents. They ran the middles effectively. And Kennedy Washington also had 7 kills out of the middle. Eva Hudson had 9 kills. Brooklyn DeLay had 8 kills. As a team, Kentucky hit 419. It was really, really, really good for Kentucky. They really proved themselves. Meanwhile, for Cal Poly, this was kind of their buzzsaw match. This was the match where they just ran into a buzzsaw as Emma Frederick led the way with 11 kills, followed by Kendall Bashir, who had 8 kills in both of Cal Poly's service aces. It was just not enough. The magic, unfortunately, ran out as midnight struck. The clock struck midnight on Cinderella, and it sucks because I think everyone would have liked to have seen 2 mid-majors duking it out for a spot in the Final Four, but them's the breaks, unfortunately, and sadly, Cal Poly just ran out of juice, and that's just how it is sometimes. I mean, the thing about Cal Poly is that they were playing such great volleyball, but once they kind of ran into that true juggernaut, I think that was pretty much GG. And again, nothing against Cal Poly. They had a great run, and they will be back sooner rather than later. You got to remember that they return a majority of their players. They'll be missing out on Emmy Bullis, who will be graduating, as well as Annabelle Thalkin. But most of the players will be back. And then you also have Brecklin Poling, who got injured 3 weeks before the season started and unfortunately missed all of the season, but she'll be back. Kendall Bashir will be back. Emma Frederick will be back. This team, the Cal Poly is not going anywhere. And you got to remember that Hawaii's leaving for the Mountain West Conference. So it's no longer going to be Hawaii's conference to run. It's going to be either Cal Poly's conference to run or UC Davis's conference to run, or maybe even Long Beach State's conference to run. But Davis, I think, loses quite a bit to graduation. I just think between Long Beach and Cal Poly, I think Cal Poly is going to probably be the one that comes out on top. But you never know for next year. Moving on to the Peterson Event Center in the land of the Yinzers, we had Pitt hosting Minnesota in the regional semifinal, where Pitt swept Minnesota 25-16, 25-23, and 25-22. Look, Minnesota, say what you want about the Golden Gophers. They were beaten up throughout the entire season. They had 4 different players end up on season-ending IR, which was just not ideal for them. But the fact that they made it all the way to the Sweet 16 is just pretty incredible, if you ask me. And they did all that they could. Kelly Kinney and Carly Gilk led the way with 9 kills. Both had 9 kills, and then Julia Hansen added 8 kills. But Pitt was just, I mean, they weren't ultimately better, but Minnesota, they made Pitt work for the sets 2 and 3. Like set 1, Minnesota was trying to work their way back from an early deficit, but then Pitt just pulled away. Set 2, Minnesota came back from a late deficit. There were actually 13 ties in set 2, and then eventually Pitt just took that second set in close fashion, and same can be said for set 3. And then for the Panthers, they were led by Olivia Babcock, who had 19 kills. They also got 8 kills from Blair Bayless and Bree Kelly each. And then Marina Pizzell added 7 kills. It wasn't really the flashiest night overall for Pitt, but it was still another day at the office for the Panthers as they advanced to the Elite 8 yet again. I think it was like the 6th straight year that the Panthers advanced to the Elite 8 as they would face the winner of SMU Purdue. Now, I was under the impression that Purdue could actually win this matchup just because Purdue has defied the odds, most likely like Minnesota, and Purdue actually did. They wound up taking down SMU in 4. Now, this was SMU's first ever appearance in the Sweet 16 or the regional semifinals, and they gave it their all, especially in set 3. I think SMU did lead 21-20, and then Purdue wound up rallying back to take the third set 25-22. And then set 1 and set 2 were basically the tale of 2 runs. I mean, SMU jumped out to a 15-3 lead, and they never looked back. And then Purdue jumped out to an early lead and never looked back. And then set 3, like I mentioned, it was a tight one. And then set 4, it needed overtime, and Purdue actually had to deal with 15 ties that set. But eventually they were able to take that 4th set 29-27 as the Boilermakers were led by Kenna Woolard, who had 23 kills, and then he had 16 kills for Akasha, Cash Money, Anderson, and then Grace Heaney added 11 kills. As a team, Purdue hit 282, which was nice. They also had 13 blocks as a team, and then they held SMU to only 7 blocks and only 2 service aces. They did get outdug 65-54, but they kind of made up for it in the blocking department. And even though SMU hit 295, I thought Purdue was very efficient offensively and defensively. For the Mustangs, Malia Jones led the way with 23 kills, while Favor Anyanwu added 12 kills. I'm going to one day get her last name right. And then Kennedy Rogers also added 11 kills. It wasn't enough for the Mustangs, who were denied a spot in the Elite 8. And they were also denied a chance at another possibility of getting a little revenge against Pitt. But unfortunately, them's the breaks. But I'm sure SMU will be back on the big stage sooner rather than later. I think they're developing a great reputation in the ACC. So don't count out and Sam Erger does an excellent job with that program. There's a reason why she was named the regional coach of the year from SMU's region. But I digress. Hop, skipping, and jumping over to Gregory Gymnasium in Austin, Texas. We had the first regional semifinal between Indiana and Texas. Let's go chronological order here. So Indiana and Texas. Texas wound up sweeping Indiana, but honestly, Indiana was not going to fold by any means. And I think the first set did not do Indiana any justice, just because Texas came out and they never really trailed. And honestly, it just kind of shell-shocked Indiana to begin with. But second set, Texas was actually up, and it looked like they were going to take it in convincing fashion, but Indiana rattled off 3 straight points. And if it weren't for the ball touching the sideline just barely, I think Indiana puts a little bit of a scare into Texas, only being down 24-23. But unfortunately, the challenge was unsuccessful from Steve Aird, and Indiana wound up losing set 2, 25-22. And then set 3, it looked like Indiana had a chance to force the third set, but Texas had other plans. They ended the match right there and then as they took the third set, 25-22. The Longhorns were led by Torrey Stafford, who had 19 kills, 0 hitting errors, and a hitting percentage of .679. Yeah, I said it, 6-7. Anyway, Kari Spears also added 8 kills. Shout out to her dad. What he said on X as well was absolutely amazing about NCAA women's volleyball. As a team, Texas hit 374, which was nice. They outblocked Indiana 12-2. Like I said in my recap, Indiana ain't going to be winning no matches if they're getting outblocked 12-2. It's just not going to work that way. And then for the Hoosiers, they were led by Candela Alonso Corcelis, who had 13 kills. Jaden Jagger added 9 kills, and then Victoria Gray added 8 kills. I'm sure Indiana will be back on the big stage. They've got a lot of good freshmen on their team, and the Hoosiers, even though they're a football school and a basketball school, they're starting to become a women's volleyball school, and that is a great sign for the state of Indiana. They need something to cheer about just because they've kind of gone through it with the Indiana Pacers and the Indianapolis Colts, but I digress. Anyway, the second match from the Austin Regional Semifinal was Wisconsin-Stanford. Now, this was kind of the match that I knew that Wisconsin was going to beat Stanford, and they did. Now, Wisconsin got off to a great start, winning the first set 25-17. Second set, it kind of looked like Wisconsin was going to try to take that set. They were up 9-6, but then Stanford turned them tied altogether, and they took the second set 25-21. And then the third set, I think this was the set where Stanford led 22-20. I think it was 22-20, and then Wisconsin ended the set on a 5-1 run to take set 3, 25-23. And then the fourth set, Wisconsin was able to inch out that fourth set 25-22 to eventually advance to the Elite Eight. Welcome back to the Elite Eight, Wisconsin, as the Badgers were led by Mimi Collier, who had 27 kills. She also had 10 digs, and she hit 373. As a team, Wisconsin hit 420, and that's in part due to Charlie Furbringer, who set an amazing offense. Carter Booth also had 14 kills, and Una Vahich added 13 kills. For the Cardinal, they were led by Aaliyah Rubin, who had 15 kills. Julia Blyshov added 14 kills. Jordan Harvey and Lizzie Andrew both had 10 kills each. For Stanford, they don't lose too much to graduation. They lose Aaliyah Rubin, and they're also going to lose Anna Pringle, who didn't really get a chance to see the floor. But Stanford will be back on the big stage. This is only the beginning. Oh, also, Aaliyah Rubin added 13 digs. But something that Wisconsin did is that they held Spencer Etzler, Stanford's outstanding freshman libero, to less than 10 digs, which was only the 8th time that had happened for Stanford this season. So it's incredible on what Wisconsin's done. I kind of figured that Stanford's youth and inexperience was going to catch up. And I did not know this. I did not know that Wisconsin had never, ever, ever beaten Stanford in program history until then. I do remember that Wisconsin had gotten the better of, or I'm sorry, I do remember that Stanford had gotten the better of Wisconsin back when Stanford had Catherine Plummer and Inky, or I think it was Inky Ajanaku or Maddie Bug, but I digress. Anyway, yeah, but for Wisconsin to make that history, it was a pretty good win, pretty darn good win for them. I knew Wisconsin's experience would get them to the Elite Eight, so that's how, Wisconsin was able to pull off the win. Next up, we had Louisville and Texas A&M in the Nebraska regional semifinal. So this one was probably the best regional semifinal of all the regional semifinals. Now, the first 2 sets, Louisville was down 5 in both sets, and then they eventually rallied to take those first 2 sets by scores of 25-23 and 25-22. Then in the third set, 15 ties. It felt like Louisville had a shot after they tied it up at 23-23. I was thinking to myself, I think Louisville's got this. Nope. Texas A&M took that third set, 25-23. And that, I think, was the difference maker right there. I think that was a massive difference maker. And personally, I think that was what swung the momentum to the Aggies. Eventually, Texas A&M took the fourth set, 25-18, and they forced the fifth set. And then fifth set, Louisville was up 8-7. and then eventually Texas A&M went up 11-10, and then Texas A&M wound up winning an amazing rally, a long 50.45 second rally. Go back and watch it if you haven't, whether it's on the NCAA Women's Volleyball X or Instagram, or just go back and rewatch the entire Texas A&M Louisville match altogether. But that point where Texas A&M went up 12-10, that was probably the dagger right there, because Texas A&M had all the momentum. Louisville did everything it could to try to catch up, but Louisville just could not catch up to the Aggies, as Texas A&M wound up winning the fifth set 15-12. Man, I actually thought that Louisville was going to advance to the Elite Eight, just because personally I want to see a Louisville Nebraska matchup, just because that's basically the Danny Busboom Kelly matchup. But Texas A&M said, not so fast, my friend. As the Aggies were led by Logan Lednicki, who had 20 kills. Then Kendall Stowers added 17 kills, and then Emily Helmuth added 12 kills. As a team, the Aggies hit 277, and they had 64 digs. They only had 2 service aces, but hey, they still served pretty aggressive for the most part. And then for the Cardinals, they were led by Chloe Chicoine, who had 26 kills, while Peyton Peterson added 18 kills, and Calissa Blackshear added 10 kills. I feel Louisville will be back on the big stage. I just think that this loss kind of brings me back to 2023, where the Cardinals got reverse swept by Creighton in the Elite Eight. Or I'm sorry, not Creighton in the Elite Eight, Pitt in the Elite Eight. So overall, it was a tough loss for Louisville, but I'm certain they'll be back. I can't imagine they won't be back on the big stage, because they're a perennial powerhouse in terms of the Power 4 schools. And then we have the most obvious matchup and the last matchup of the Nebraska regional semifinals, and the last regional semifinal match altogether. Nebraska versus Kansas. I said Kansas could possibly hang with Nebraska, but then I realized, wait a minute, this is Nebraska we're talking about. Nebraska is just too good, y'all. They are too good. As Nebraska just brought out the brooms and just dusted away Kansas 25-12, 25-11, and 25-12. Nebraska never trailed, and there were only 2 ties altogether in that match. And one came in set 2 and one came in set 3. Like, once Nebraska got off to I think it was like a 6-1 lead in set 1, I was thinking to myself, this is going to be one long match for Kansas. As the Huskers were led by Rebecca Alk, who had 9 kills, as well as Andy Jackson. Best middle blocker duo in the NCAA women's volleyball realm. Don't argue with me. Nebraska also hit 450, and they also had 10 blocks to Kansas's 1. Look, I don't want to dunk too much on Kansas. This was kind of expected. I feel Nebraska, once they got that ugly match out of the way against Kansas State, they knew what they needed to do against their next opponent, being Kansas. So, look, it's nothing to be ashamed of if you're Kansas. I mean, you obviously have to do what you can on your side of the net, but this is Nebraska we're talking about. They don't beat themselves. You got to go out and beat them. Anyway, that is that for the Sweet 16, aka the regional semifinals. Now for the regional finals, we had the Battle of the Royal Blue, Creighton versus Kentucky, where Kentucky wound up busting out the brooms and sweeping Creighton. I was not expecting a sweep. I thought this was going to be a little bit better of a match, just because Creighton had fought its way to the Elite Eight for the 2nd straight year, and first time under Brian Rosen, because you got to remember, Rosen was in his first year. But Kentucky held Creighton to under 20 points in all the sets. That's just how impressive and talented Kentucky was. As Brooklyn DeLay led the way with 18 kills. That's a nice little rhyme. Brooklyn DeLay led the way with 18 kills and 12 digs. Eva Hudson added 13 kills and 15 digs. Molly Tuzzo, yes, Tuzzo, not Tuozo. Molly Tuzzo had 17 digs. As a team, Kentucky hit 263, but they held Creighton to only a hitting percentage of 66, well under 100. Overall, it was just a defensive clinic for the Wildcats. They had 62 digs compared to Creighton's 47. The blocks were actually kind of even, but honestly, I just think that Kentucky's defense was just putting on a clinic in terms of not letting the ball drop. For Creighton, they were led by Jaya Johnson and Ava Martin, who both had 8 kills. They also got 13 digs from Analia Mader, and then they got 10 digs from Sydney Brasinger. Let me just say, by the way, Nora Wirtz had 3 service aces. She became the single season service ace record holder at Creighton. That was nice right there. I just got to make note of that. But other than that, it was just kind of a buzzsaw match for Creighton. Kind of their ugliest game since they lost to USC. But a lot to be proud of for Creighton, especially under first-year head coach Brian Rosen. I think they'll be back sooner rather than later. And then that was the Kentucky regional final. Now we jump back to the land of the Yinzers, where we had Pitt hosting Purdue. First 2 sets were kind of close. I mean, Purdue was hanging around Pitt, but Pitt did take the first 2 sets 25-22 and 25-21. Then the third set, Purdue jumped out to an early lead. And even when Pitt had the answer, whether it was tying it up or drawing close, Purdue had an answer for Pitt as they took the third set 25-22. Then the fourth set, it looked like Purdue had an early lead, and then Pitt said, and that's when I took it personally, as Pitt eventually took that fourth set 25-17, ending it off with 2 aces from Brooke Mosier. Her top spin serve is just sick. She had 3 service aces, 7 digs, 47 assists, and 4 kills altogether. Olivia Babcock led the way for Pitt with 23 kills. Marina Pazel added 14 kills, as Pitt is back in the Final Four for the 5th straight year. Now, I kind of have to wonder, will Pitt be the bridesmaid again? My hope for them is that I hope that is not the case. I think Pitt is a good team. I don't know how they'll fare against the likes of the winner of the next match that I'm about to go over. But for Purdue, they have nothing to be sad about. I mean, this is going to sound a little cruel, but the fact that Purdue as a team got farther than Chloe Chicoine on Louisville is a little funny. I'm not trying to start a squabble, or I'm not trying to start a civil war with Purdue fans, but food for thought. Anyway, Akasha Anderson, a.k.a. Cash Money, led the way for Purdue with 20 kills, while Kenna Wallard added 15 kills and 13 digs. Purdue actually hit 272. The problem is that Pitt hit 349. And also Purdue did outblock Pitt by 11-7, and they kind of outdug them, but it was just not enough. Offensively, I just thought Purdue just was a little bit behind the 8 ball. Ryan McCallum added 14 digs as well, so that's something to make note of as well. So, yeah, that was that for the Pitt regional final. And now we go to this regional final, the Nebraska regional final, where I thought, and I think most people thought, no matter who Nebraska drew, whether it was Louisville or Texas A&M, Nebraska was probably going to advance to the Final Four. And I even said on last week's show, until Nebraska gets beaten, and I'd be shocked if Nebraska were to lose at the Bob Devaney Sports Center, I'd pick Nebraska to go to the Final Four no matter what. Texas A&M had other plans. So apparently Texas A&M is a physical team that matches up well against Nebraska, according to the likes of Emily Eamon and I think Holly McPeak and whatnot. But Texas A&M was actually down 15-10 to start set 1. And then they managed to rattle off not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 10 straight points to take the lead at 20-15. Eventually, Texas A&M took the first set 25-22, and then I just sat up and I was like, okay, A&M, you've got my attention. And then the second set was pretty much the same. Texas A&M used a run in the set to eventually take that second set 25-22. And now they kind of had my attention. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, Nebraska's been here before. The last time they were down 0-2 was to Kentucky, which eventually Nebraska wound up reverse sweeping. So could they do it again? Perhaps. Nebraska wound up taking the third set 25-20. Nebraska looked like their Nebraska selves. And then set 4, Nebraska was down 18-11. And everyone was starting to pretty much carve the grave for Nebraska. Everyone was thinking, let's pencil in Texas A&M to the Final Four. And I kept thinking, why? I mean, the number one rule when it comes to Nebraska women's volleyball, they're never out of it. Ever. Ever, 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 ever out of it. Nebraska eventually wound up rallying back to tie up the set, and then the set needed overtime. And Nebraska needed 10 set points, and they dodged 3 match points from Texas A&M to eventually take set 4, 37-35. Again, I can't confirm if that set was the longest set of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Division I season, but it has to be up there. And then the 5th set, Texas A&M actually jumped out to an 8-6 lead at the media timeout. Now, here was kind of the play that I think was the key for Texas A&M. So I forget who. I think it was Rebecca Alec tried to get a kill, but she was blocked. But it felt like the ball. It looked like at first the ball went out of bounds, but the ball actually touched Rebecca Alec's back, and eventually it went out of bounds. And since the ball was last touched by Nebraska, Texas A&M got the point. So instead of being tied 7-7, Texas A&M is up 8-6. And eventually Texas A&M was up 12-7, and it was danger zone time. But then again, as I said, Nebraska is not to be counted out by any means. And eventually Nebraska caught up to Texas A&M, and they were only down 1 at 14-13, but Texas A&M was able to close off the match. I think Logan Lednicki had the match-clinching kill, and just like that, onions were cut, brackets were busted. Texas A&M was dancing all their way to the Final Four. Wow. I was just stunned. I don't think anybody in their right mind predicted Nebraska losing. Bear in mind, Nebraska had not lost a match this season. They were 33-0 going into that match against Texas A&M. And in addition, Nebraska had not lost at the Bob Devaney Sports Center since 2022, when Minnesota last handed them a loss at home. But Texas A&M, as the title says, did that. They wound up beating Nebraska. And I just got to say, Texas A&M, I apologize to you all. I wasn't really familiar with your game, and I truly mean it. I'm not just referencing Shaquille O'Neal, but I truly mean it. I apologize to you all. I was not familiar with your game. Kendall Stowers led the way with 25 kills. She also had 16 digs. Absolute powerhouse performance from her. You got to remember, she almost medically retired from the sport of volleyball after she suffered too many concussions, and the doctors at Baylor forced her out. But she kept on going, and Kendall Stowers was just absolutely amazing for Texas A&M. Logan Lednicki also had 24 kills. You also got to remember that Logan Lednicki also was part of, I think it was the U21 team that played in the, oh no, I think it was the U.S. national team that played in that played over the summer in the, I forget the annual tournament. It was the the tournament that we always see in the World Championships. I think it was called the World Championships or something of that sort. Either way, Logan Lednicki had herself a monster game as well. Emily Helmuth also added 13 kills. Ifena Kas-Akpala had 8 blocks to go along with 6 kills, and she didn't have any hitting errors, and she also had 6 digs too. As a team, Texas A&M hit 275, and I think they held Nebraska to their lowest hitting percentage of the season, 270. And that says a lot about Nebraska, because Nebraska does not have any bad hitting nights. But someone who did have a bad hitting night was Andy Jackson. She had 6 kills with 5 hitting errors. She eventually got subbed out, and taking her place was Manaya Obeche, the Southern California product, which did me so proud to see. Obeche led the way, or Obeche had 5 kills, which was good. She made a great impact, and she's going to be a giant when it comes to this Nebraska team. Harper Murray led the way for Nebraska with 25 kills. Rebecca Alec added 15 kills. My big thing for Nebraska is that I wish they had fed Rebecca Alec more. Rebecca Alec was just feasting in the middle. Feasting! She even hit 480, and she only had 3 hitting errors. And my heart really breaks for Rebecca Alec. If you saw the post-game press conference, she was just a mess. She was just in tears. And honestly, every player or coach that just has that emotional breakdown or that cries is just, I feel bad for them, especially for a player. And what's worse about Andy Jackson's performance is that she only hit 45 on the night, and that unfortunately will not give her the hitting percentage record, which really sucks. And that was courtesy of Lincoln Arneal, who covers Nebraska volleyball for, I think, is Husker Sports. Either way, he covers Nebraska volleyball. Anyway, the Huskers, look, I'll give them this. They did win the serve battle. They had 8 service aces to only 6 service errors. My only qualm with Nebraska is that they got outblocked 17-8. That's rough right there. I will say this for Texas A&M. They earned that win. They wound up winning in front of 8,650 in attendance. And for Nebraska, I'll say this. They'll be back on the big stage. They return a lot of players. They don't return the likes of Rebecca Alec. They didn't have Ali Check, who pregame, she accidentally stepped on a ball. Yes, she stepped on a volleyball, and unfortunately, she was out for the game. She was in tears. That was tough right there, not having Ali Check. And overall, Nebraska only loses 4 seniors this year. I think they will be back. I don't think they're going to be losing too much in terms of graduation. They lose Macy Bosiger as well. And they also lose Taylor Landfair, who had 7 kills. But Nebraska will be back. They return the likes of Bergen Riley, Lainey Choboy, Harper Murray, Olivia Mock, Virginia Adriana, who's only a freshman. I think she's in her 20s, but I digress. And Annie Jackson will not have another match like that again. And Manaya Obeche will probably be the opposite middle for Andy Jackson, filling the role in for Rebecca Alec, who graduates. And then finally, we have the regional final, which was held in Austin, Wisconsin versus Texas. So Wisconsin actually was down 10-7 in set number 1. And I actually missed the first set because I was doing 3 and out with Larry. But Wisconsin wound up rattling off 4 straight points. Eventually it was tied 11-11, and then Wisconsin just pulled away from there, wound up winning the first set 25-22. Second set, Wisconsin actually didn't trail, and there was only 1 tie as they eventually took the second set 25-21. And I'm thinking this Wisconsin team's bringing back those 2021 of the fall vibes. And that was the team that wound up winning the national championship. I said 2022, but I was a year off. But I digress. Anyway, then Texas responded really well. The Gregory Gymnasium was feeling it. You could feel the energy, whether you're in person or on TV. You could hear it in the announcer's voice, saying that Texas was back from being down 0-2. They took the third set 25-20, and even Marcus Spears was hooting and hollering for his daughter. The fourth set actually came, and Texas actually jumped out to a 4-0 lead, and I'm thinking that Wisconsin's looking a little bland to start set number 4. Wisconsin saw that and probably saw my post and said, and I took that personally. And Wisconsin responded in a big way. Eventually, the Badgers took the fourth set 25-19. The set was a lot closer than the final score indicated, but Wisconsin is back in the Final Four. Unbelievable gameplay. This was a pretty darn good Wisconsin team. I thought Texas was at least going to make it to the Final Four, but unfortunately, they just missed out as Mimi Collier led the way with 23 kills. Carter Booth added 11 kills, and Una Bahayich added 15 kills. Charlie Furbringer was her Charlie Furbringer self, setting the offense with 57 assists and 9 digs. Wisconsin as a team, they hit 294. And if you saw the post-game interview from Carter Booth with Michaela Chester, Carter Booth said, "We refuse to effing lose." It kind of reminded me of Moni Nikolov's post-game interview with Kevin Barnett in the post-national championship. It was just epic right there. Oh, also Grace Egan added 9 kills. For Texas, here's where I think they got their worst match of the season. Tori Stafford had only 9 kills, and she only hit 132. But she did have 10 digs, but this was clearly not Tori Stafford's night. Even Emily Eamon, who was doing color commentary, you could tell Tori Stafford was not having her best night. Kari Spears led the way for Texas. You know Texas was off its A game when Kari Spears, a freshman, had to lead the team. But that just goes to show Texas's future is bright. Kari Spears led the way with 12 kills. Nia Bunton had 7 kills. Abby Vanderwall had 9 kills. Tori Stafford had 9 kills. Vanderwall just entered the transfer portal, by the way. So that's really a tough loss for Texas. Emma Halter had 13 digs. I felt bad for Emma Halter. She also was in tears. It wasn't as bad as Rebecca Alex, but, you know, Emma Halter, you just feel bad for the poor girl. She poured her heart and soul to being the libero for Texas. And you just feel bad for Texas as a whole. But Wisconsin, they did that. And I don't think anybody in their right mind predicted Wisconsin to be the last team from the Big Ten remaining in the NCAA tournament. So if you had Wisconsin in the Final Four and as the last team from the Big Ten Conference still alive in the Big Dance, kudos to you. But Wisconsin did that. So congratulations to Wisconsin. And that is that. Your Final Four is as follows. Did I not save my photos? Let me just get rid of this. Final Four is as follows. Let's just get rid of this. Texas A&M versus Pitt, and then Wisconsin versus Kentucky. It's going to be an epic Final Four. It's going to be on Thursday. The first match starts at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, which is 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time. And your Final Four is, boom. So, yeah, here's the Final Four preview. Who's going to win it all? All right, so let's re-predict this Final Four shindig. So, all right, who's going to win it all? So, the first semifinal is Texas A&M versus Pitt. All right, it's the bridesmaid versus the little engine that could. I'm not going to call Texas A&M Cinderella just because even though Texas A&M was probably going to get to the Elite Eight, by the way, it's their first ever Final Four appearance. Man, Texas A&M is just on a tear, but you got to remember, Pitt has the experience with Olivia Babcock, and they have the coaching experience with Dan Fisher. Man, it's like, do I dare pick against Texas A&M a third straight time? I mean, I picked Louisville as lock of the day over Texas A&M in my NCAA women's volleyball picks. And then I had Nebraska as lock of the day over Texas A&M in the Elite Eight. At what point do I actually get it right with Texas A&M? One team is going to be making its first ever national championship appearance, whether it's the Panthers of Pitt or the Aggies of Texas A&M. Man, it's like, I really don't know. I'm going to be spiting one team no matter what happens. But you know what? I'm hopping on the College Station train, and I'm going to pick Texas A&M to advance to the national championship. I'm sorry to Pitt fans, but Texas A&M is the little crimson red engine that could. Give me the Aggies to advance to the national championship. And then we have Wisconsin versus Kentucky. By the way, before I continue, this is actually a fun fact. This is the first time that Texas and Nebraska won't be featured in the Final Four for the first time since 2019, which was the year that Wisconsin wound up making the national championship. And then Emily Eamon, who is just so darn smart at when it comes to the NCAA women's volleyball realm. She actually wound up one-upping me. And according to Emily Eman, you want to talk about parity in NCAA women's volleyball? This is the first time since 2011 that the national semifinals will not feature Texas, Nebraska, Penn State, and or Stanford. Yeah, just like everybody predicted. So Emily Eman straight up one-upped me, and I was just downright impressed. As Davidson Crooks pops in the chat room, he says, hit that like button. Well, thank you, DC. I appreciate it. But he also goes on to mention, I know he's an SEC guy. He's an Alabama fan, but he said, also shout out to Texas A&M on the upset. And that actually says a lot because that's coming from an Alabama fan, because I know Davidson Crooks is a Bama fan. But the fact that Davidson Crooks says shout out to Texas A&M on the huge upset, that was massive right there. So when you have Davidson Crooks, an Alabama fan, saying shout out to A&M on the upset, you've earned the praise of a lot of fans out there. But back to my preview of the Final Four. So I have Texas A&M advancing over Pitt, and then for Wisconsin, Kentucky. Oh man, this is an interesting semifinal. Look, Kentucky is just playing its best ball, but Wisconsin is just so silky smooth offensively. Charlie Furbringer has that offense just humming like an engine. And I'll say this for Wisconsin, they are just so much better with Charlie Furbringer than without. You got to remember that Charlie Furbringer hurt her shoulder in Big Ten conference play, and it looked a little grim for the Badgers when it came to Big Ten conference play, because they lost to a few teams. They even lost to USC even with Furbringer. But I'll say this for Wisconsin, they're playing some really good volleyball as of late, and I don't think there's a better team playing better ball than that. That said, I'm going to go with Kentucky. I think Kentucky, they're just, without Nebraska, I just think this is Kentucky's time to shine. Now, it's not going to be easy for Kentucky to win just because Kentucky has won. They haven't lost since they lost to Pitt. I said last week that other than Nebraska, no team has had the answer for them. That is not true. Pitt and Nebraska have beaten the Wildcats this year. But I think the Wildcats advance to the national championship. I think Craig Skinner does it again with his program. The Wildcats actually haven't been back to the national championship since the spring of 2021, aka post-COVID. So I have Kentucky advancing over Wisconsin. And then for my national championship, I have Texas A&M and I have Kentucky. I have an all-SEC final. Go figure. Yeah, just like everyone predicted. All right, so A&M versus Kentucky. I mean, look, I love Texas A&M. I think their story is outstanding. I love what they've done with their program, but I'm going to be 100% honest. I've got Kentucky winning the national championship. If Nebraska was facing Kentucky, I would have picked Nebraska in a heartbeat. But now that Nebraska is no longer, in the tournament, this is Kentucky's time to shine. This is where Kentucky must win the national championship because they'll get 1 year with Eva Hudson. After this year, Eva Hudson is off to the PVF. I think she's going to be playing for the Atlanta Vibe, but and I'm sorry, did I say the PVF? I meant the MLV. Sorry, the MLV, not the PVF. PVF is gone. MLV is the new deal. But anyway, my only problem with Kentucky is that they have only one senior, and that senior is none other than Eva Hudson. Everyone else is an underclassman. That said, this young but dangerous Kentucky team is just absolutely outstanding. So I think this Kentucky team gets the job done, regardless of who it plays, whether they play Texas A&M or whether they play Pitt. So my official pick is Kentucky over Texas A&M in the national championship. Now, let's say Pitt takes down Texas A&M. Would Kentucky still have the better matchup against Pitt? That's actually going to depend, just because you got to remember, Pitt did take down Kentucky early in the regular season. But I think Kentucky was still kind of in its infancy stage back then. I think now Kentucky's still a better team. So I think no matter who Kentucky draws, whether it's Pitt or Texas A&M, I think Kentucky gets the job done. But let's say Wisconsin takes down Kentucky. Then which is the better matchup, or which is the worst matchup for Wisconsin? Pitt or Texas A&M? I think Texas A&M matches up better against Wisconsin. I think even though Wisconsin is a really good team, I think they still have they're still a little bit on the young side. So, and meanwhile, you got to remember that Texas A&M is very senior laden. They've got 9 seniors this year. So, and those 9 seniors did not want to say goodbye when they faced Louisville when they were down 0-2. They did not want to say goodbye when they saw their 2-0 lead evaporate and be forced into a 5th set against Nebraska. I think if it's Wisconsin advancing past Kentucky and Texas A&M advances to the national championship, I've got Texas A&M beating Wisconsin. If Pitt does manage to get past Texas A&M and then Wisconsin advances, then I got Wisconsin beating Pitt. As much as I love Olivia Babcock, I just think, and as much as I want to see Olivia Babcock versus Charlie Furbringer, got to remember those two players faced one another in the CIF Southern Section Division I championship. I would pick Wisconsin, a red-hot Wisconsin, whose offense is just at a blistering rate. But my official pick is Kentucky over Texas A&M in the national championship. Re-official. Anyway, but that is my pick for the national championship. Now watch as it's going to be wrong. Watch as it's going to be Pitt versus Wisconsin. But I digress. Look, honestly, I wouldn't even mind if Pitt or Texas A&M winning the national championship, because one of those two teams will be advancing to their first ever national championship. Meanwhile, for Wisconsin and Kentucky, those two teams are trying to get national championship number 2. But something's got to give here. So we shall see what happens. Thursday is the national semifinals, and then Sunday is the national championship on ABC. We shall see what happens then and there. But that'll do it for the NCAA women's volleyball portion of the show. We're going to take ourselves a quick commercial break. When we come back, we've got some NCAA men's volleyball to discuss, as I was in attendance for the MPSF Men's Volleyball Media Day in Costa Mesa, California, the first ever MPSF Men's Volleyball Media Day. So keep it locked here. You were listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Lava.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That give you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
Hockey fans, I'm Adam Kernan.
And I'm Zach Puplis.
Together, we are the newest version of Hockey Talk on IE Sports Radio, The Neutral Zone.
Zone.
We love hockey, but we also know it's not everyone's first sport. So we want to make this show as much for new fans as for the diehards.
Whether you can name all the Swedes on the '08 Red Wings Stanley Cup team, or if you can't tell if Varlamov is a goalie or the latest trendy vodka, we're here to help. With facts, figures, and outrageous fans, we bring you all the hard-hitting hockey news you can handle, while still keeping it fun and on the rails. Well, mostly.
So tune in every week as we go around the hockey world, from college to Canada, the minors and the majors, and everywhere in between.
So bring your cellies,
And your one-timers,
you wicked wristas.
and be sure to protect your five-hole.
Catch the Neutral Zone every week on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
We promise not to pick on the Arizona Coyotes every episode.
And we are back with Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows. But let's get back into the volleyball action. So I actually want to go over some NCAA Women's Volleyball Division II action. So the NCAA Division II Women's Volleyball National Championship was last Saturday. Yes, last Saturday. But also congratulations to Indiana Wiseland. So I think I recapped this last week, but Indiana Wiseland wound up beating Northwestern of Iowa in 4 sets last week to claim the red banner for the 3rd straight year. Now I kind of got to wonder, is Indiana Wiseland starting to become a dynasty in NAIA women's volleyball? That's just food for thought right there, but honestly, I'm starting to believe it, just because Indiana Wiseland is just that team when it comes to NCAA women's volleyball. I think it's pretty darn cool, if you ask me. So congratulations to Indiana Wiseland on winning another red banner for their school. I think it's pretty darn awesome. But anyway, now that that's kind of out of the way, the Division II National Championship. So congratulations to MSU Denver for winning the national championship over Concordia St. Paul. Now, how MSU Denver got to the national championship was unbelievable. They took down the number 1 overall seed and previously undefeated Tampa in straight sets in the semifinals. Now, Tampa actually just barely got past Ferris State in the quarterfinals, but the fact that MSU Denver was able to do that, oh man, that was absolutely outstanding by MSU Denver. And like I said on X, I said it just goes to show that anything is possible in the NCAA women's volleyball world, or anything's possible in NCAA volleyball in general. Or to quote Kevin Garnett, anything is possible! Anyway, MSU Denver was led by Megan Hager in the semifinals, who had 12 kills. As a team, MSU Denver hit 308. And even though Tampa hit only 243, they only had 3 blocks as a team. They did have 55 digs, which wasn't bad, but they had only 1 service ace. And meanwhile, MSU Denver actually had 9 service aces, even though they missed 9 serves. But that's just a showing of how aggressive of serving that they had. So Tampa was led by Connor Ron, who had 16 kills. But unfortunately, it was just not enough, as Tampa suffered its first loss. Tampa, just like Nebraska, wound up losing at the worst possible time. Except Tampa lost in the semifinals. Nebraska wound up losing in the quarterfinals at home. So anyway, might as well recap the other semifinal match. So Concordia St. Paul actually took down Point Loma. Say it ain't so. Point Loma lost. And go figure, Point Loma and Tampa were the 2 teams I picked to make the national championship in Division II. But Concordia St. Paul and MSU Denver had other plans, as Concordia St. Paul was led by McKenna Nold, who had 22 kills, while Kaylin Snoozy, that's an all-time name, she had 19 kills. Milena Straub added 13 kills for Concordia, who hit 277. They had 81 digs. If I hadn't known better, I thought Concordia St. Paul was from the Big Ten with 81 digs. Point Loma had 74 as well, so I thought this was kind of a Big Ten match, but I digress. Cassie Sealing had 23 digs to go along with 7 assists, so she was just an anchor defensively. Ellie Sealing, I'm guessing that's her sister, she had 8 kills to go along with 15 digs. And then Reagan Hickey and McKenna Knoll both had 11 digs. Meanwhile, for Point Loma, they were led by Abigail Nua, who had 21 kills, while Haley Clark added 10 kills. As a team, Point Loma hit 249. Concordia St. Paul hit 277. Point Loma only missed 1 service ace, but they only had one, or I'm sorry, Point Loma only had 1 service error, but they had only 1 service ace. Whereas Concordia St. Paul, they actually had 7 service aces to only 5 service errors. So they kind of wound up winning that service ace, service error battle or ratio. Either way, Point Loma had 7 blocks as a team, while Concordia St. Paul only had 4. So what Concordia St. Paul kind of lacked in the blocking department, they made up for in the dig department. But for the national championship, MSU Denver, I got to watch the replay of this. MSU Denver took down Concordia St. Paul in 4 sets, 25-22, 25-20, 25-20, or 20-25, and 25-21 to win the national championship. MSU Denver was led by Megan Hager, who had 18 kills, while Brooke Gennerman added 16 kills. Karina Worley added 10 kills for MSU Denver, who hit 280. Concordia St. Paul only hit 209, as they were led by McKenna Nold, who had 25 kills. She nearly had half the kills that Concordia St. Paul had as a team. The next kill leader for Concordia St. Paul was Ellie Sealing, who had 9 kills. But it wasn't enough, as MSU Denver's balance offensively was what paved the way for them to win the national championship. And good for MSU Denver. The fact that they took down the number 1 overall seed, handed them their first loss in that same said match, and wound up winning the national championship is well deserved. So that is that right there for the Division II national championship in NCAA women's volleyball. Women's volleyball season is winding down. Now let's jump on into some NCAA men's volleyball. So today was the first ever MPSF Media Day. So I actually managed to attend. I didn't attend the whole day, but I did manage to get some interviews with players, and I got some nice little pictures. So let's go over to the handy dandy database. So there is Pepperdine. So that's Jonathan Winder and Jacob Riley. And then right there is Brian Rofer and Logan Friedman of Vanguard University. So you had those guys right there. I managed to ask each of them a question. And then there was UC Merced. So UC Merced is actually a new team from the MPSF. They actually wound up, they're actually a new team jumping, and they're actually a new team altogether in NCAA men's volleyball, because they made the jump from NAIA all the way up to NCAA, which I think is pretty nice. So in that picture is actually Chris Carter, the head coach. He's the second one to the left. The one in the middle is Caleb, was Mason Stokes, and then the one on the second to the right is Caleb Cole. So the one on the far left is Rob Aspero. He's the one that kind of was the moderator and the one that pretty much organized this whole event. And then the one on the far right is Sarah Paven, former Nebraska standout and former ABCA player, All-American. So that there was that right there. And then this picture was a picture. This is a picture of Kyle Steele, the head coach. He's second from the right. The one in the middle is CJ Osahan. He's the one in the middle. He's an athlete. He's a player for William Jessup. And then Colin Marks is second to the right in terms of the ones pictured. So William Jessup, or Jessup, is a new team from the MPSF. They're actually making the jump from, well, they're actually from the 2C 2A conference, where they wound up winning that. They were in their first year last year, and the fact that they had less than, I think it was like 4 months or 4 weeks to put together a team was pretty darn impressive. So, and they still wound up winning the 2C 2A conference. So congratulations to William Jessup for accomplishing that last year. This year they're in the NCAA and they're in the MPSF, and they're now kind of going to be in a they're now going to be a little fish in a big pond as opposed to being a big fish in a little pond. It still is pretty cool to see the game of NCAA men's volleyball growing, especially with a new program like that. So there's that right there. And then we had USC. We had Jeff Nygaard second to the left, and then Dylan Klein second to the right. And that was also pretty cool. And then we had Stanford with John Costi, the head coach, second to the right, and then second to the left, John Costi, the head coach, and then second to the right was Teran Rodriguez, who was, like I said, second to the right. And then lastly, this was the final team I got to see. It was UCLA. So second to the left was John Hawks, the head coach. Third to the left was Zach Rama, an Arizona kid. Third to the right was Andrew Rowan. And then second to the right was Sean Kelly. So that's pretty much all the teams that I got to see when it came to the media day. Unfortunately, after I interviewed UCLA, I had to bolt out of there just because I had to make a doctor's appointment, sadly. Unfortunately, I couldn't reschedule my doctor's appointment, nor could I push it back. So it was either that or wait till January, and I can't wait that long. So anyway, it was a very fun event. Shout out to Rob Aspero for organizing this whole thing, or being the first one in the know about this. He was also the moderator, like I mentioned. Shout out to Darren Preston, who kept me in the loop as well. That was pretty darn awesome too. So thank you to those two. And I also got to see a lot of people. I got to see representatives from USA Volleyball. I got to see Victoria Dennis, who is doing her thing as a broadcaster, and she's soon going to be married. I got to meet someone from one of the Long Beach State men's volleyball managers from last year, which I thought was pretty cool. He liked what I did. I got to find out some inside info that I'm about to share real quick. And I got to see some familiar faces from UCLA, USC, and so on and so forth. And I got to meet new people. So there you have it right there. And I promise you all, I'll be posting my content once I'm pretty much done with this once I'm done with the show. Anyway, so some info I need to drop for you all. So the coaches poll was actually released last week. So something that was announced at the MPSF Media Day. So it's going to be the top 8 teams from the MPSF advancing to the MPSF tournament. So if you're top 8, you advance to the MPSF tournament. If you're 9th and 10th, well, tough tamale. Better luck next year. So that's a new wrinkle, because last year every team made the MPSF tournament, and then there were buys all over the place. UCLA had a bye all the way up to, I think it was the semifinals. And same, I think, was said for USC as well. But in the end, Pepperdine wound up winning the whole MPSF tournament just because they were also the host team, and they also were just an incredible team altogether. So here's the MPSF men's volleyball coaches poll. So UCLA is the favorite to win, but they're only favored by like 2 or 3 points. USC and Pepperdine tied for second. This was voted on by coaches, by the way. I had no vote in this. Stanford was selected to finish 4th. BYU was selected to finish 5th. Concordia Irvine 6th. Menlo 7th, which is another team I didn't get a chance to see, as well as BYU and Concordia Irvine. Vanguard was selected to finish 8th. Jessup was selected to finish 9th. And then finishing 10th is UC Merced. So I don't necessarily disagree with this. I think SC is closer to UCLA than normal. Same can be said for Pepperdine. One person actually told me that Pepperdine is going to underperform this year, which I totally disagree with. I think Pepperdine might even overperform just like they did last year. And UCLA, it's going to be tough to replace Cooper Robinson, But I think their libero will be Brogan Glenn this year, from what Zach Grama told me when I interviewed him. Luca Kirchi is no longer going to be the libero. Sean Kelly's back. Andrew Owen's back for his senior year, which is going to be the farewell tour until he goes off to USA Volleyball. Who else is notable? Grayson Bradford. He is going to be someone to watch for. I've seen him put in the work when it comes to fall ball. This kid's special. I also got to see him play at Miracosta for that 1 year. And to quote a good friend of mine, Avery Drost, Big Bradford is a gnarly weapon. So, yeah, Bradford is just an absolute beast of a player. So I think I really think that Big Bradford's going to do big things. Grayson Bradford is going to do big things. So anyway, and then here's a little hot. Okay, I'm actually going to save this take for later, but Stanford, I think we got to put more respect on Stanford. They returned practically every player from last year. And look, I know it was just the Moses Wagner and Teo Snooey show led by Theron Briette, but they do have other players. I think it is I forget his last name, but it's like Clinton something. But I digress. So I think Stanford is kind of being undersold. I think Stanford is being undersold, and I think we got to put a little bit more respect on Stanford. And I think that was kind of the punishment for that everyone pretty much said, for everyone that underestimated Stanford last year. Because I think most people had Stanford advancing past BYU in the MPSF tournament. I'm kind of one of them, where we all need to remember that the Stanford team last year almost took 2 matches off of Hawaii. They almost won both matches against Hawaii. They did manage to only win one, but the second match was a much bigger night. Nate Clinton is his last name. So Nate Clinton could be the third pin hitter as well. It also could be Alex Rotman, who missed all of last year. So there's that. BYU, they're an interesting team. They did lose Trent Moser as well as Keone Tim to graduation. But honestly, I think this team should still be pretty good. Oh, no, Trent Moser still returns. I'm thinking of Keone Tim that they just lost. So Trent Moser does return. Jackson Pfeiffer returns. Jonathan Talon Tafuga returns. And you also got to remember that BYU is hosting the MPSF tournament. So the MPSF tournament is going to be held in Provo, which is going to be pretty scary because BYU is a darn good team at Smith Fieldhouse. If you beat BYU twice, you have a good team. And that's what Hawaii did last year. So, twice in Smith Fieldhouse, but I digress. And I think BYU is kind of being undersold. I just think that BYU isn't as good as UCLA, SC, or Pepperdine. And then with Stanford returning practically everybody, I think BYU is just under Stanford. Now, this one I think is going to be a little bit of a hot take. Concordia Irvine, I think, is going to pull off one upset. Who will it be against? I don't know. But I think Concordia Irvine might be the most undersold team out there. They brought in a lot of good transfers from a lot of good teams, whether it's from GCU, curse you GCU for cutting your men's volleyball program. I think they got a transfer from Penn State. They brought in some really good junior college men's volleyball athletes who I actually covered back either at Orange Coast or Golden West or San Diego Mesa, but I digress. So you got to remember, they have a first-year head coach in John Gurton who was on the GCU men's volleyball staff last year. So you have the familiarity from the MPSF. I think Concordia Irvine is going to pull off some sort of upset, and I think they're going to give some teams some trouble. I would not be surprised if Concordia Irvine really made a team sweat when it came to MPSF play or anywhere in their schedule altogether, because they've got a good coaching staff with Gurton. Eric Valley is also a great coach. I remember covering Newport Harbor. He guided the Sailors to a CIF championship over Loyola back in 2022 when that Loyola team was stacked with the likes of Dylan Klein, Ryan Sprague, Ryan Venna, Sean Kelly, who was only a sophomore, Owen Lonecar, and so on and so forth. But anyway, Concordia Irvine has a fantastic coaching staff and an under-the-radar roster. Do I think they're going to be world beaters and beat UCLA, Pepperdine, USC, Stanford, and BYU? Probably not. But I think they're going to beat at least one of those teams. If not, they're going to pull off an upset outside of the MPSF. But this Concordia Irvine team is going to be dangerous. So do not underestimate them. Buy your stock when it comes to them as soon as possible. And someone else also does agree with my Concordia Irvine take, which I'm glad I'm not plumb loco, but I digress in that regard. And then as for 7, 8, 9, and 10, look, I don't want to say that the teams that I just mentioned, Menlo, Vanguard, Jessup, and UC Merced are going to be nah. But it's like, I think Menlo and Vanguard kind of have an edge over Jessup and UC Merced just because they now have that familiarity in the MPSF. I just think that those two probably will have a leg up. And I think maybe Jessup and UC Merced will have kind of some growing pains. But we shall see. We shall see. Maybe you never know. So there is that right there for the MPSF and men's volleyball. And then there was some other NCAA men's volleyball news dropped in the MPSF media day, and that was the NIL tournament field. So last week I mentioned that USC was the final team to be announced in terms of the NIL tournament. So the tournament field is as follows. It'll be Long Beach State versus USC, and then it'll be UCLA versus Hawaii, which that's a blockbuster matchup. It's two MPSF teams and two Big West Conference teams. Two MPSF teams, two Big West Conference teams facing one another. It's just that the MPSF and Big West will face one another in a matchup, and then the other matchup will feature them. I wonder how they're going to do it in terms of the championship. I mean, I imagine it's going to still count as a non-conference game because I remember UC Irvine faced Hawaii in the Outrigger Invitational, and that still counted as a non-conference game. So I imagine these will still all be non-conference games. This will be a tournament. It's going to be a fun tournament. I think USA Volleyball is pretty much going to be the host for all this. They're going to be the ones running the show, not the MPSF, not the Big West. It'll be the USA Volleyball. So I gotta get into contact with Kelly Reiki or Laura Fawcett on getting a credential for that. But they all know who I am. I'm going to be clearing my plans for that. Nobody's going to be getting my way, no matter what. Anyway, so that tournament field that's going to be on February 19th. Those matchups that I mentioned will be on February 19th. Long Beach State, USC, UCLA, Hawaii. And then the winners will face each other the day after, and then the losers will also face each other the day after as well. So it's going to be a fun day. I can't imagine UCLA, Long Beach State, and Hawaii will be the top 3 teams in the nation in no particular order. I think USC is going to be in the top 5 this year. I imagine USC is going to probably be either number 5 or number 6 to start. I think Pepperdine will start out as number 4. And then probably UC Irvine or USC will be number 5 to start the season. And then whoever is not number 5 will be number 6. And then 7 downward is so on and so forth. But yeah, this NIL tournament is going to be fun. And I'm so glad we're getting a tournament to hype up all volleyball fans. It's not just Hawaii volleyball fans that people are going to be passionate about that's going to be making their way down to the Honda Center. It's going to be USC fans. They're pretty passionate. UCLA fans are obviously passionate. And then Long Beach State fans are pretty passionate as well. So I think this is going to be a fun little tournament, and I cannot wait for this. So keep your eyes peeled for that and get your tickets when they first come out because I guarantee you they're going to sell out just like that. Anyway, so that is going to do it for the NCAA men's volleyball talk. I did hear at the tournament that the MPSF beach volleyball media day is going to be next week. I can't confirm that for sure, but I will just say I wouldn't be surprised if they wound up having the MPSF beach volleyball tournament, just because they can't have it the week after because that's the week of Christmas. I'm sorry. No, they can't. Yeah, they can't have it the week after because that's winter break and that's close to New Year's. And then they can't have it on, well, maybe they can't have it on January 5th, but that's pretty much close to teams reporting and whatnot. So I imagine next week is going to be perfect to have the MPSF beach volleyball day. If that is fully confirmed, I'm going to plan on attending just because why not? And why not interview some of these beach volleyball coaches? That's because I got to get my beach volleyball game up, but I digress. But that is just a rumor. I will fully confirm it on X or Instagram and TikTok as well. So keep an eye on that. It would most likely be at the Costa Mesa Marriott, just like today. So there you go. All right, but that is the only bit of NCAA beach volleyball news right there. And ladies and gentlemen, that is, oh yeah, one more thing, and then I'll let you all go. So more NCAA men's volleyball news. The MEVA coaches poll actually just came out. So the preseason player of the year was Patrick Rogers of Ball State. The MEVA coaches poll is as follows: Loyola Chicago 1, Ohio State 2, Ball State 3, Lewis 4, McKendree, everyone's favorite team from Lebanon, not Lebanon, Lebanon, number 5. Number 6 is Lindenwood, 7, Purdue Fort Wayne, 8, Northern Kentucky. So yeah, Northern Kentucky is a new team that is in the conference. And then number 9 is Queens. So you're probably wondering what happened with Quincy. I totally forgot about this in terms of men's volleyball. Quincy is no longer in the MEVA. They're now in another conference. I want to say it's the NEC. I'm not certain. I'm actually just looking it up on the fly as is. But Quincy actually had them. So they're going to be in the GLVC. So yeah, Quincy will be in the GLVC. So that the Great Lakes Valley Conference. So hopefully that's going to be. Hopefully that'll probably be one of the few automatic qualifiers. I imagine it won't start out as the automatic qualifier, but if you all have been paying attention, the NCAA men's volleyball tournament field has been expanded to 12 teams, and this would have been really good for teams like USC and UC Irvine last year. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and unfortunately, those seniors had to say goodbye to their team. But back to Quincy. Yeah, Quincy is no longer in the MEVA. They're now in the Great Lakes Valley Conference, which I think is pretty cool if you ask me. And Quincy had been under the MEVA banner since 1994. So that was 31 years that Quincy had been in the MEVA, but now they're embarking on the Great Lakes Valley Conference. So Quincy actually made a good impression last year. They actually managed to take down some good teams here and there. I think they took down Ball State, if I'm not mistaken. They took down one good team. I think it was either Lewis or Ball State. Either way, Quincy made one final good impression before departing. So good for Quincy, and I wish them the best. So that'll do it for the NCAA men's volleyball portion of the show. But do you all think Loyola Chicago will repeat as MEVA conference champions? Do you think Ball State has anything to say? Does the Ohio State have anything to say about it? Does Lewis have anything to say about it? Can the McKendree have another miracle run like they did last year? Time will tell. But that'll do it for the NCAA men's volleyball officially of the show. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. I will just say, if you're going to the Final Four in Kansas City at the T-Mobile Center, first and foremost, I envy you. Second and foremost, I am jealous of you. And third and foremost, I'm sad that I'm not going to be attending because airfare and tickets, and I don't even think the NCAA is going to approve me for a credential, even if well, who knows? Maybe they would, just because I was at the first couple rounds of the NCAA tournament at USC. But anyway, if you're going to be at the T-Mobile Center, have fun. Don't be stupid. And one last thing before I sign off. It was this little message posted by my good friend Izzy, aka the Volleyball Recap. Be a good person. Do not drag student athletes. It is just not right. If you're picking on a student athlete in general, whether it's dragging them or just saying negative things about them, you're the problem. We need to use the platform of the social media platforms to grow the game of volleyball instead of ruining it and just tarnishing its athletes and starting squabbles. But yeah, just read this whole thing and just live by this thing that's on the screen right here. Again, a massive shout to my good friend Izzy, aka the Volleyball Recap, for posting that. I don't care where you post it. Just be smart. Don't diminish an athlete. Don't be that way, whether it's on the NCAA account, whether it's on a player's account, whether it's on a team's account. Just please be a smart person, be a good person, because a lot of these student athletes are mental health is no joke. And I'm not the type of guy to like bring up things that deep, but if we're really picking on student athletes, then this is the problem with sports and whatnot. So this is the ugly side of sports, but I digress. But anyway, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourself an amazing week. This is the last week of women's volleyball season, and then soon we'll be transitioning to NCAA men's volleyball season, which is going to be superb. But until then, have a great week. If you're going to Kansas City, aka the T-Mobile Center, for the Final Four and National Championship, Set Point salute to you. But have a great week. Enjoy all the volleyball action, and I will see you next week. Take care, everybody. Peace.
Yeah.